In this video, we're going to look at how you can use the category option in your Blackboard Grade Center to make your grading a little bit easier. Grading by category is a really helpful thing to know about because it offers some extra options beyond those you would find if you were just grading by individual column. A couple of the things that it's really helpful in terms of doing for your final grades or your weighted total grades for your students are, first of all, it will let you grade a set of assignments that maybe don't add up especially neatly. So if you say had to have 6 assignments that were worth 15% of the final grade, individually those assignment numbers are a little bit weird because it doesn't divide neatly. But if you divide based on category, Blackboard can do that math for you. It's also a really helpful thing to know about if you wanted to, say, grade a group of assignments together and do something like drop the lowest one, because Blackboard has that functionality built into grading the categories, which makes your life a little bit easier in the long run. To work with the categories, I'm going to start in my Grade Center. And we can see here that for my course, I have a number of assignments that are already set up. I have an assignment, I have 3 tests, I have 6 blogs for my students to complete over the course of the semester, and I have a final exam. So in the case of this class, that first assignment that I have here is going to be worth 20% of the final grade. My 3 tests are going to be worth 40%, which you may note doesn't divide especially nicely. My 6 blogs are going to be 15%, and my final is going to be 25. To grade using categories, I'm going to come to my Grade Center, and I'm going to go to the weighted total column, just like I normally would. I can click on its drop-down, and I can come to Edit Column Information. And this is exactly the same process that I would go through if I were just grading in the regular way, using just the columns and assigning them individual values towards that final grade. Now if I scroll down a little bit, I'm going to be using the same box to select columns that I usually would. Now it is important to note that if you are grading using categories, you can mix categories and columns together if you need to. So if you have a couple of assignments that are standalone, you can grade those on their own, and then you can grade based on category for the things that it makes sense to do that for. So to give you an example, in my case, I have one assignment that's worth 20%. So I can choose that assignment, I can move it just like I usually would, and I can assign it a value. But then if I looked at something like my blogs, where I have 6 blogs over the course of the semester that are worth 15% of the final grade, those numbers don't calculate out especially nicely. So I could figure out what each individual blog is worth, and I could select from my columns up here, and I could assign them that way. Or to make things a little bit easier, I can come down here and I can choose my blog category. Now, one thing that's really important to understand with Blackboard is that any columns that you create in the system using one of Blackboard's tools that has a grade attached to it, they're automatically going to have a category assigned to them. So if I am doing blogs with my students, they're going to get assigned to the blog category. If I'm doing assignments, they fall under assignments, tests fall under tests, and so on. The same is true of things like the discussions, the journals, and the wikis as well, if they do have values attached to them. So Blackboard is making that choice for me, which works fine in a lot of cases. So in my case, I can look at my blog here, I can click on that, and if I look down here, I can see that I have blog 1, blog 2, blog 3, 4, 5, and 6 all falling under that category. And I know that there are supposed to be 6 blogs. I can see them all listed there. So I know that everything that is supposed to be in that category is in that category. And this is a handy way to double check things. So if, for instance, I looked here and blog 3 wasn't visible to me, it would be an indicator that something wasn't right somewhere. Maybe it wasn't categorized correctly, although in this case it should be because Blackboard set that category. Or maybe something happened like I didn't assign a value to it, so it's not being included here. In either case, this is a really nice way to double check that things are as they're supposed to be. So from here, I know that I have selected my blog. I know that all of my blogs are included there. And if I come down here and use this lower arrow, that will move the category over the same way that the columns get moved over. But you'll see that there's a bit more information here and a few more things that I can do. So first of all, I know that all of my blogs together are worth 15% of the course grade. So I can go ahead and I can put that in. But with something like the blog, that in my case is maybe a small assignment over a number of different weeks, I also have a few different options that I can play around with. And one of those options is that I have the option to weight the columns differently. So the columns might be weighted equally, so everything that's in that blog category is valued the same towards that 15%. And given that all of my blogs in this case are graded out of 4 points, that makes perfect sense. If I were, on the other hand, working through some different things that had, say, different values, if I had a blog that was out of 4 and then a blog that was out of 35, that might be a little bit different. And so, in that case, if things are a little bit different, I might choose to weight things proportionally instead, which will assign a higher value towards that 15% for things that have more points. In this case, though, I'm just going to leave it at equally because equally makes sense. All of my blogs are worth the same, and I want that to be represented in the grade. The other thing that I can play around with is that I can drop a grade. So if I had 6 blogs, but I wanted to cut my students a break because the semester's been a little rough, things are a little weird right now, I can choose to say, drop the lowest grade. And if I make that choice, Blackboard is going to do that math for me. It's going to take that lowest grade out of the equation. I could do more than one lowest grade taken out if I felt so inclined, but Blackboard is going to make that decision for me based on the mathematics of the grade center. And this is a really helpful thing for the grading because, as you can see, it does keep everything grouped together. It also gives you more flexibility across the course of the semester. So if you suddenly decided that there were too many assignments and 1 or 2 needed to be dropped, because Blackboard is just grading everything and weighting everything that's in that blog category, it doesn't care how many things are in there. So if you suddenly can't do a couple of assignments, or if you suddenly have to add a couple of extra assignments into that category, Blackboard's just going to figure out what those look like towards that 15%, and it's going to take care of all of the math for you. In this particular course, I also have 3 tests that I want to grade together. So looking at my tests, there are 3 of them worth 40% of the course grade, which also doesn't divide out especially nicely. So in this case, if I wanted to, rather than calculating the individual value of each test and then valuing those columns, I could use the test option instead, where I grade based on the category rather than individually. Now if I click on Test, it's always worth checking down here because you can see that what I actually have in this category is Test 1, Test 2, and Test 3, which I want. But because I've made my final also a test in Blackboard, Blackboard has automatically assigned it to the test column. And I don't want that test sitting there because that's going to skew the grade in ways that I'm not terribly happy with. Fortunately, this is a really easy thing to fix in Blackboard. So right now I have a couple of things already set up over here, and that's fine. I'm going to submit on this so that I can exit the weighted total column. I'll get the warning that it's not 100%. That's totally fine. It's just letting me know. And then if I come back to my full grade center, I can go to the column of that final assignment. And if I click on its drop-down, I can come back to Edit Column Information. And what I can do from here is I can change that category. So the default here is test because it was built as a test in Blackboard, but I have a number of different options that are available to me. Now it doesn't really matter what I put this in. Blackboard doesn't really understand the difference between most of these categories. It's just using them to group things together. But I wouldn't want to add it to something that already had assignments in it and that I was grading as a category. But I can choose pretty much anything else. So I could in this case go no category if I wanted to and just grade that column individually. Or I could just choose to designate it something else. In this case, this is my final exam, so maybe I will call it exam, and that will make sense. Now you can do this same process too for anything that is an assignment that you're grading, but that students aren't submitting through Blackboard. So if you are, say, doing a presentation and they're not submitting anything, you can set the category for those columns as well, even if you're manually creating them, which will let you group different things together, even if they haven't originated from within Blackboard. And you can always come back and edit these things after the fact too. So if you need to put some things into a category or take them out to make sure that the grading is working the way you want it to, that's something that's always available to you. So I'm good with my exam category. And if I click on Submit, we should be good to go back to that weighted total column. If I click on its drop down and go to Edit Column Information, I can once again come back to where I make my choices about what I'm grading and how. And if I come down to Test this time and double check that, we can see that now the only things that are in that test category are Test 1, Test 2, and Test 3, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And once again, I can move that category over here. I know that I want the 3 tests in my class to be worth 40%. In this case, I know that my tests have significantly different values. So I have one test that's out of 25, one that's out of 50, and one that's out of 75. In this case, it might make sense for me to weight them proportionally. But again, that's up to you as an instructor. It might be that different values of the tests themselves still should be weighted equally towards that 40%. So if that makes sense in your context, that's also totally fine. And in this case, I don't actually want to drop any grades because these are tests and they're all important. So I'm going to leave that alone. And if I don't put anything in either of these boxes, it's going to value all of the tests that are in that category towards that final grade. So that's good. And then once I have that sorted, I can put in my final grade. And I do have the option to either choose the final grade up here, or if I wanted to grade it as a category, I could choose exam down here and I can see that my final is there. In this case, there's nothing I really need from the category, so I'm just going to grade it based on that column. I will put in that 25%, which should take us up to 100. And there I am, all ready to go with my final grades. If I click on Submit, everything should be weighted and all ready to go.